So this is the start of our part 2 from the video that we had the other day. Again, monetization in gaming. If you want to check out the video we did previously, I'll put it up right here. So let's dive into the video from Mobile Gamer. So now I want to jump over to the Mobile Gamer video. He brought up a Forbes article here. And really when it comes down to it, a lot of this is why it's scary when 0.15% of mobile gamers bring in 50% of the revenue. And really that's something that I want to anchor in this conversation that I think a lot of people don't recognize is that there is a very, very minute, these gigantic whale krakens who spend insane amounts of money on games, bring in a lot of the revenue. So what that means is these gaming companies are going to lean into that. They're going to try to get those people to spend a lot of money, which brings in very unfriendly free-to-play mechanics or even cheap-to-play mechanics. Tying that back into Marvel Snap, right now, we don't have that type of thing. Second Dinner, in my opinion, is really trying to balance that pretty well.
Well, this is quite a headline. This is coming from Forbes. Why it's scary when 0.15% of mobile gamers bring in 50% of the revenue. But this data is coming from a company that I did more research on.
So then Mobile Gamer goes into talking about a company and sort of how they analyze different things as far as what these companies do. He's talking about Marvel Strike Force, again, which is a game I used to play, which is extremely expensive to play.
And that Forbes article was based off of data from several years back. And this is the most recent information I can find from Swerve. Now,
Again, Swerve is the company that's gathering this data.
This data is compiled from the following companies.
It's a lot of companies. It's a ton.
3.5 billion mobile game apps.
3.5 billion apps. So the data that this company is bringing together, this is the stuff that Second Dinner has access to. All of these games and all of these companies have access to this. They all know what it is. They are going to do whatever we as a society of gamers is going to lead them to do.
And processing 14 billion events daily, tracking purchase histories and things like that.
So again, these are a lot of companies who are getting a lot of information from stuff like this. It's really important to know that this stuff is out there.
Now, I found that this data is bonkers. Just like I said, that a very, very, very high percentage of revenue on mobile games,
and this is the important part,
companies is coming from a very, very, very small group of the public. But not only that, they track the cost of the offers, and they are saying that offers that are over 50.
This is huge. We talked about this from the article from the Snap.fan.
$51 account for 61% of the revenue.
$51, this US dollars, offers that are more expensive, 51 plus cost, accounts for over 61% of the revenue. And look at this chart for a second. The yellow one here, that's $0 to $6. That's 5% of the revenue. 6 to 11 is 6%. 11 to 21 is 13. 21 to 50 is 15%. So if you are a company, where are you going to focus on, right? 61%. That's where you're going to go. You're going to go to the 51 plus offer. It's just going to where you go. Now, do you want to hit every one of these? Yeah, probably. 89% of the revenue from these companies comes from offers from $11 to $51. So almost everything is going to be more expensive than that. The microtransactions, the $0 to $11, I mean, that's 11%. It's just, you're not going to get a lot of those. So this party talks about the concept of where these developers, they got this data. So listen to this point.
Is very similar, or if at a minimum, you know, the people over at Scopely,
which is the company that makes
to this data,
Marvel Strike Force,
probably more currently than I have. This is just what's public, and I'm sure that this company sells this data to developers like Scopely, and I'm sure they have their internal data as well, because Krakens are funding this game, and I have no idea.
Mobile was talking about some aspects of Marvel Strike Force and certain things that they were talking about. I'm not going to get into that, but that concept is what is coming from the data that Krakens fund these games. So you're going to have a lot of expensive offers.
Idea what the stats are for this game, but when you have mobile gaming in general stats, where a very small percentage of the players are bringing in 50% of the revenue, it's going to drive the direction of the game.
This is the huge part. It is going to drive it. You got to understand that from a business perspective, this is how it's going to be. If we societally decide that's where all the money comes from based on spending, that's what they're going to do. Just like how we react by hoarding or doing whatever we're going to do in game, they're going to react based on what we do. At this point, mobile discusses some things specific to Strikeforce. And again, this could affect us in Marvel Snap, but really the concept is that when Krakens aren't spending money in certain areas, if the game gets to the point where they used to be making money from Krakens and now they aren't, they will find a way to make up for that money. And that's something I don't want to see happen with Snap. So I'm hoping that we can find ways for the Krakens to spend and for those cheaper players to spend too.
Wanted to say that the developers are hyper interested in Krakens and whales. And there was a speech made by a gentleman by the name of Henry Fong, who is a developer, and he's known for being a monetization guru in the mobile gaming space.
And we want to look at this because of what this ends up leading to and what this person does. Because being a monetization guru, that means they're, again, potentially compiling things, making information, which these companies will then use.
And there was an article written up from his speech, which happened in 2019. I believe it was in Australia, at the GCAP talk. And the title of that was about making great money to make great games. And there's 3 headlines here that I just want to read. And it's about AI being used to identify whales.
So now there's going to be AI out there, again, not just tracking, but to identify who is actually going to be that whale. And some of this is interesting.
Before they even spend.
Before they spend.
Or identifying whales in other games and then feeding them into games that they make a lot of money off. And I think
so think about that too. Like, so they find whales and then they go ahead and they feed them into other games like that. It's just like, holy cow.
Think about Scopely. I know they make a lot of money per player off games like Marvel Strike Force. And my understanding is that Star Trek Fleet Command is also a very profitable game for them. And he was talking about maybe on some of the other games where they're not as profitable, they identify the whales and then they try to attract them to the other game. Is kind of what this was about.
And that to me is sort of crazy, just that's even a thing.
But they're using AI for this, and it's fascinating.
AI,
and he says, about a
nuts.
year ago, I decided, what if I could teach AI to find whales in games? And then he created some software. He plugged in 2.5 years worth of data, and he found that after 14 days, the accuracy of picking potential whales after 14 days was about 87%. We think we can get it up to about 95%.
So they're going to find a way to identify whales within a 95% accuracy. They're going to know who you are and then decide what to do with it. So again, the point of all this is that there are these systems out there that I guarantee this is millions and millions of dollars of an industry because they're spending a bunch of money to make it and they're selling this to gaming companies. And I again want to reinforce the stuff that we're seeing in Snap is not leaning into this as hard as they could be.
And then it concludes with this quote here, and I'm going to read the quote, and maybe this gives insight to the way that and the reasons why things are the way they are. I always used to think that if you monetize your audience too hard, they will leave the game, but it's the other way around.
It's the other way around. And this is what's crazy. And he's going to point out a little bit more about this. But the more you get people to spend, the more they stay. You're going to get more people that way. You're going to be more profitable that way.
He was more referring to like brand new players to the game. He's talking about hitting them up with a lot of
welcome bundles,
options.
cheap.
And if you can get them to spend anything, they're very likely to stick around. But I think this is true. One, the Krakens are super important to the bottom line of Marvel Strike Force.
And every game. It's not just about Strike Force. The data's there.
The free to play, the cheap to play, even myself, who spent several $100s a month, is nothing compared to the players that are literally spending thousands of dollars a month. And that's what triggered this whole conversation, is they were talking about in one of the games that I think he consults for, they were able to get $150,000 out of a player.
150 grand out of one player. He's going to go on here to talk about how in Strike Force, and I remember this from back in the day, there are people who spent 4 or 5 times that amount. There are some speculations that there are people who spent over $1 million on that game. These people fund these things because whether it's a Saudi oil prince, it's a trust fund person, it's somebody who invested wisely. Whatever it is, these people who don't spend wisely and they're spending on the game, all these people were spending crazy amounts of money.
What I was thinking about this is that the game is expensive because the Krakens will spend, and I've said this many times before, because I believe that Scopely is data driven. If they had a way of making more money by
this is critical
prices, they would.
I got to give him credit for saying that.
Of this strangeness that I've seen in mobile games where there's extreme baskets of players, where there's free-to-play player or light spenders where they don't spend enough to actually move the needle on the revenue. And it's very hard for the game developers to get players to spend that are free-to-play.
And this is the key part that we were talking about in the front end of this video. And I know this is long, but a lot of this information is really important, where you're talking about these people who, don't want high expensive offers, but at the same time, those expensive offers are what fund the game. And it's data driven. It's out there. It's known. So I think what Guest is doing and what I'm potentially trying to do is encourage people to just be happy with what some of the stuff we've got. Voice your opinion if you're upset. I'm not saying don't voice your opinion. If you're unhappy, be unhappy. Voice what you're having, but maybe take a look at an understanding for why some of this stuff exists. The companies react to how we react versus our purchases.
Play purists or that won't spend any money. And then there's the other extreme where people are spending, $150,000 of the game or 4 times more than that. And even myself, who spent more than 25,000, I compare that, it take 20 of me equal 1 Kraken.
Crazy.
I don't move the needle. And my buying.
And understand what he was just saying. He who spent, $25,000 in a game like Strike Force doesn't move the needle compared to some of these Krakens. That's a ton of money for an entertainment hobby, whatever it might be. And again, subjectively speaking for me, but it doesn't do anything to these companies. So you've got to think about that when we're looking at all of these different costs and how they come to game. The expensive ones are going to drive the game. We want those because they support the game, that make the game last. The key is we want to still be able to compete as close as possible with people spending money, but people won't spend money if they don't get some exclusivity. You got to remember that.
Decisions and the way that I purchase a Marvel Strike Force doesn't matter to their bottom line, where it's probably a very small subset of the players that are bringing in all the revenue. And that is what Forbes headline is saying right here. Old article.
This is back in 2014. I'd be curious to see what the numbers are now, but it's Forbes, right? That's a reputable source, Forbes.
But the data is still there from the company and it still looks the same.
Yep.
So
and that was 2019. Mobile then goes on to talk about how he's worried about how things might happen in the game that he's playing and covering. He used to play Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. In that game, at some point, they decided you couldn't gear up unless you got 7 stars. So you can see here, this person is ready to go to the next tier, but they couldn't because they were gated by a star system. Now, this is very different. This is a hero collector. You're building things up. I don't know how they could necessarily do that in Snap, and I don't think they could, but this is the type of thing that some games do, is that in order to drive spending, they gate things. So Mobile sort of ends his video with talking about how he hopes that they keep a game free-to-play friendly, cheap-to-play friendly, Kraken friendly. And I generally agree with that, where I think any game wants to lean to that, because what's the point of just having a Kraken game? There's less people to play. I guess everybody could show off their exclusivity a little bit, but it sorely and slowly ticks away. One of the games I played, I think, made a mistake with that, with Marvel Future Revolution, where they just leaned way too heavily into the Krakens. They had bugs and all sorts of other things too that caused problems, but that was a thing that I think was part of the downfall of that game. So again, we've got 2 things here. We've got, well, maybe 3, I don't know. We've got the debate going on within Marvel Snap. We've got data that's out there. Again, it ranges from all these different games, but it's important to understand that so many of these games lean into this data. I'll say it again. If they could lower the prices to make more money, they would. They do stuff based on what we do in mass. Like if there are more people spending more money at lower levels that make them more money, that's what they're going to lean into. If there are less amount of people spending a massive amounts of money that make them more money, that's what they're going to lean into. Now, ideally, they have it for both, which is right now what Marvel Snap is doing. And that 90% number, remember this, 90% of the cash bundles in game are cheaper than $25. Marvel Snap could go the complete opposite direction here based on what we generally know to be good data. But so far, they haven't too much. So it really is all about what we spend in game and who's spending more. If they find they're making more money off of offers like this, guess what we're going to see more of? Offers like this. Again, personally, I choose not to necessarily be mad at these. I analyze them. I try to share the information as best I can with you so that you can decide what's best for you, keep within those budgets, etc. If I can't afford it, I personally choose to move on. That's it. If you, I mean, I guess I could be mad about it. I've been mad about it in games in the past. I'm not sure that it's really gotten me anywhere. Truth is companies are going to do what they're going to want to do. Players should do what they're going to want to do. And if most of those players don't like something and it's not making the game any money, guess what? The game's going to find a way to adjust. So I try to focus on positivity the best I can, try to share what I can. If spending money keeps people around, then I get why they encourage it. I mean, it's like you're going to get a couple small offers. And I think if I had a game that I made, that's what I would do too. I'd lean into trying to get someone to stick around, and I'd have cheap offers and I'd have expensive offers. So that way I'm getting both people in those different buckets. And the people in the middle might sometimes buy expensive, might mostly buy cheap, and that's fine. I try to dip in and get everybody. So this was a crazy long video. Look, I really wanted to do it though because it was an opinion piece. It's a hot topic. And look, I'm going to get called a shill. I'm going to get called all these different things, a player protector, not thinking about the company. And that's fine. It's the internet. But I wanted to share these thoughts and hopefully get, 1, 2, 3, how many ever people to consider a multiple different perspectives, whether it be for second dinner, whether it be for free to play, whether it be for someone who spends a bunch of money or somebody who spends no money. We should all sort of just look at everybody as like, look, what would our incentives be to whatever it is we might want to do? And are we going to judge that person based on what that is? You do you. I hope this video was somewhat helpful. If you want to help the channel, hammer down like button, subscribe, all that sort of thing. And until next time, we hope you have a wonderful day.